Welcome to our latest study. We are so glad you're here. Today, we're diving into a comprehensive and honestly, a truly mind-bending summary based on the incredible deep dive source material from the YouTube channel Trey. You can actually find the link to his original presentation right down below in the description box, and I highly recommend checking it out. Before we get started, TGC invites the Rapture Brethren to become Ecclesia members of this channel, The Gospels Compared. Extra content will be available, and members may request a summary video of their choice. Now, the overarching thesis of the information we're studying today connects ancient biological anomalies directly to biblical texts. It proposes a reality that is vastly more complex and, frankly, a whole lot stranger than anything you'll find in our modern history books. So buckle up, because we are about to unpack a sprawling, deeply interconnected web of genetic anomalies, occult history, and absolutely stunning prophetic mathematics.
The entire foundation of this study actually rests on this one ancient, heavily debated passage from the book of Genesis. The source enthusiastically points to this specific scripture to map out the origins of literally everything we are about to discuss today. I want you to pay very close attention to that little phrase right in the middle, and also afterward. According to the study, this passage is not just some ancient metaphorical myth. No. It is presented as a literal historical record of an unnatural intersection between dimensions, an event that continued to plague humanity long after the events of antiquity.
To navigate this massive topic, here is our roadmap for the study. We'll start with the physical anomalies, move to the Watchers, look at the pre-flood world, trace the occult empires, connect it to modern UFOs, and wrap up with the ultimate biblical countermeasure.
Let's jump right into Section 1, Skulls, Giants, and Anomalies. This is where we look at the physical claims in the modern world.
The source doesn't just rely on dusty ancient texts, it points directly to tangible artifacts discovered all over the globe. Take a look at the elongated skulls found in Paracas, Peru. The source claims these are fundamentally biologically different from normal human skulls in ways that totally defy conventional explanation. For starters, they reportedly possess at least a 25% larger head volume than a standard human. But even more strikingly, they are entirely missing the sagittal suture. That's the standard two-plate crease in the back of a normal human head. The argument here is that this is a biological impossibility for a human. Now, you might be thinking, well, what about tribal head binding? Mainstream historians suggest that's the cause, but head binding can only reshape existing bone. It's like molding clay. It absolutely cannot magically increase brain volume, and it certainly cannot erase foundational human genetic markers like cranial sutures. The source argues these structural differences indicate a completely non-human genetic footprint.
And this isn't just an isolated thing in Peru. Scaling these claims globally, the source points to biblical accounts of King Og of Bashan and massive Canaanite tribes, but then crosses the ocean to highlight some really fascinating correlations. For instance, consider the Native American legends of fierce, red-headed giants roaming North America. It's easy to dismiss as folklore until the study references a massive, incredibly robust human-like jawbone recovered in Lovelock Cave, Nevada, which deeply corroborates those exact indigenous oral histories. Then, there are the mysterious serpent mounds of Ohio, where giant skeletons were allegedly documented back in the 1800s. The study even brings in ancient Babylonian artwork depicting a giant with 6 fingers and 6 toes. That is a highly specific, highly anomalous genetic trait that perfectly matches biblical descriptions of enemy giants.
Moving from the physical evidence, we enter Section 2, Genesis and the Watchers. We're looking at the texts of the ancient hybrids.
To truly grasp the scale of this claim, we really have to understand the definition of the word Nephilim. The source emphasizes that this ancient Hebrew term translates directly to the fallen ones. It serves as a sort of umbrella term for hybrid creatures of high strangeness. Make no mistake here, we aren't just talking about very tall, otherwise normal people. The study posits that these were literal, flesh-and-blood biological anomalies birthed from a highly unnatural, unsanctioned crossbreeding. We're talking about an intersection between spiritual, interdimensional beings, traditionally called fallen angels, and human women.
Relying on ancient texts like the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Book of Enoch, the source details how an original group of 200 entities, known as Watchers, voluntarily left their higher dimension. Think about the narrative weight of that for a second. They allegedly abandoned their elevated spiritual state, crossing a dimensional boundary to enter our physical reality. And they did this with the very specific intent of corrupting the biological software of life on Earth. They were essentially trying to hack and overwrite humanity's foundational genetic code.
This brings us to Section 3, Pre-Flood World and Entropy. This explores a history that was entirely washed away.
The history of this ancient era builds a stark counter-narrative to modern science. The source contrasts the mainstream ascending evolutionary model, claiming there are exactly 0 undisputed missing links between apes and humans, with a fascinating alternative biological concept called genetic entropy. In this view, biological DNA is likened to highly complex digital software on a hard drive. Instead of miraculously improving and gaining new information over millions of years, the code is actually slowly degrading. It's deteriorating, it's mutating and weakening with every successive generation, much like a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy constantly losing its resolution and clarity over time.
Expanding on this idea of pristine, original early software, the study cites historical texts like the biblical genealogy and the Sumerian king list. These texts routinely report extreme human lifespans before the flood. We're talking about figures like Methuselah living an astounding 969 years. The source suggests this was biologically possible due to a hyper-lush, incredibly high-oxygen environment that supported massive flora and fauna across the entire globe. But this vibrant world was supposedly washed away abruptly by a massive global deluge. And as evidence of this sudden cataclysm, the source points to stunning geological anomalies. I mean, we're talking about massive whale fossil graveyards buried deep in arid deserts, and impossibly marine seashells scattered across the highest freezing peaks of the Himalayas.
Section 4 takes us into empires, mythology, and the occult, looking at the post-flood rise of these entities.
Notice the striking consistency of symbolism across ancient, totally disconnected cultures. The source analyzes recurring symbols found all over the ancient world. You have the serpent denoting hidden ownership or forbidden wisdom. There's the ubiquitous solar disk, and then you have the Eye of Horus, which, fascinatingly, the study notes uncannily maps to a perfect cross-section of the human brain, specifically targeting the pineal gland. It also highlights the recurring motif of stars placed inside crescent moons. The study asserts this actually represents angels, or spiritual entities, being summoned through a biological birth canal. The core claim here is that these distinct, separated cultures weren't just making up random myths, they were all actively participating in the summoning and worship of the exact same fallen entities.
This brings us to the infamous Tower of Babel, overseen by Nimrod. The source views this not merely as an arrogant, tall building project, but as a massive, ancient gateway. It was a literal stargate, or an invocation ritual on a grand scale, meant to pierce dimensions and summon entities, like the Sumerian Enki, up from the abyss. And the study traces these post-flood practices directly into specific royal bloodlines in Egypt. It notes that figures like Akhenaten and King Tutankhamun exhibited those exact same bizarre, elongated skull features we discussed back in Section 1, all while they were heavily practicing these esoteric occult rituals.
And this is exactly where the ancient bridges into the modern world. The study connects ancient Babylonian summoning directly to infamous 20th century occultists. It cites John Dee, who was an intelligence officer for Queen Elizabeth and developed Enochian magic to contact what he called angels. It also brings up Aleister Crowley, a self-proclaimed black magician. Both of these men allegedly performed extensive, highly complex rituals, like Crowley's famous Amalanthra working. They claim these rituals literally open dimensional doors, allowing these non-human ancient entities to step right through into our material world.
This leads us seamlessly right into Section 5, UFOs as demonic forces. We are looking at the modern deception.
Breaking down the extraterrestrial hypothesis is a major focus here. Backed by the rigorous research of figures like Dr. Jacques Vallée, who is a highly renowned astrophysicist and computer scientist, not a fringe theorist, the study argues that UFOs are not interstellar spacecraft visiting us from distant planets. Instead, the data suggests they behave exactly like interdimensional entities. The argument is that they are the exact same shape-shifting, highly deceptive spiritual forces described in antiquity. They are merely molding themselves to fit our modern, technological expectations. So, they aren't spacemen at all. They are the ancient demons updated and repackaged for a 21st century audience.
The study draws some truly chilling parallels between ancient occult rituals, near-death experiences, and modern alien abductions. Reports from experiencers frequently describe terrifying, pit-like alternate realities. These are environments that feel like decrepit, mechanical, yet somehow living cages. The source equates this lower dimension to the biblical second heaven, where these fallen forces reside and operate their deceptive, parasitic games on humanity. It really forces us to ask if modern science fiction is actually catching terrifying glimpses of a very ancient, very real spiritual reality.
Finally, we reach the climax of the study in Section 6. We shift from these dark, deceptive entities to the divine countermeasure.
The source outlines a highly mathematical plan put in place to counteract this spiritual virus. It reveals a breathtaking hidden architecture within the ancient biblical texts. For example, it points out that God's exact, painstakingly detailed instructions for the layout of the Israelite camp in the wilderness organized millions of people into the exact shape of a massive cross. But here's the crazy part: it was visible only from a bird's-eye view thousands of years before human flight. Furthermore, the study claims that the high priest, while standing before the Ark of the Covenant, invoked a phrase translating to "behold the hand, behold the nail," over 1,500 years before the brutal practice of crucifixion was even invented by the Roman Empire.
This supernatural precision extends mathematically right into the book of Daniel. The study walks through the stunning foresight of the prophet. From the exact historical date of the decree of Artaxerxes to rebuild Jerusalem in 445 BC, calculating using ancient 360-day prophetic years, it creates a span of exactly 173,880 days. This lands squarely, with an absolute zero margin of error, on April 6, 32 AD. That is the exact historical day of Jesus' triumphant entry into Jerusalem. The source heavily emphasizes that this jaw-dropping mathematical precision was established over 500 years in advance. It's like an impossible mathematical lock and key.
And it gets even deeper. The study claims that if you translate the ancient Hebrew root meanings of the names in the genealogy from Adam to Noah, it reveals a hidden prophetic sentence spanning generations. When you put the translated names in order, it reads, "Man is appointed mortal sorrow, but the blessed God shall come down teaching, his death shall bring the despairing rest." The source views the entire biblical text not just as a religious book, but as a highly advanced digital code designed entirely around love to permanently free humanity from the control of these ancient, parasitic entities we've been discussing.
We will end today's study with this provocative thought. If our reality is indeed finite, layered over a vast, ongoing spiritual conflict, just as the source material claims, it begs the ultimate question. Are we truly awake to the forces battling for our history, and more importantly, our future? It's a lot to process, and it certainly leaves you wanting to investigate these ancient mysteries a little closer for yourself. Thank you so much for joining us for this study. Until next time, keep questioning and keep seeking the truth.